Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Biotech expansion Mythic. For starters, you'll need to own the Biotech DLC as well as the additional workshop content Biotech expansion Core. Whilst not required, this mod does have integrations with Biotech expansion Mammalia, Ideology and Royalty. Having covered Mammalia, it only makes sense to cover Mythic too. Whilst it includes significantly less xenotypes, they're far more powerful, and have unique structures and items that play into their genes and abilities. So Mythic includes 2 new xenotypes, 3 if you're also using Mammalia, their associated genes and 1 new faction, the Mythic House of Fire. If you want to see 2 of the new xenotypes occasionally turn up on raids, you'll want to make sure that this faction is included in world generation. Righty. What new xenotypes are there then? You have the Glint Scale, which is a Draconid, the Ash Feather, which is a Phoenix, and the Tailbinder, which is a 9-tailed fox. Understandably, all of these xenotypes live up to the name of Mythic, and have hugely involved xenogenes which also make use of Archetype genes. Now, before we dig too deeply into these genes, let's quickly cover 2 of the new resource systems which will fuel them, Reverence and Aurum, as well as the structures and items associated. Reverence can be earned at one of 3 possible structures, the Simple Revered Totem, the Wrathful Totem, or the Life-Filled Totem. These are treated like meditation focuses by normal pawns and connect directly to a revered target by setting them as the owner, which will always be a Tailbinder. The pawns praying at the totem will slowly generate an item known as a Revered Mote. These can be consumed by Tailbinders to recharge their Reverence bar at a rate of 20 per mote. If you're thinking, oh, this sounds like Hemogen for Sanguiphages, you're along the right lines. Only this resource needs a lot more likes, follows, hearts and obsessive comments to generate. This isn't the only thing that motes can be used for though. If you can manage to collect 90, they can be compressed at a crafting spot to create a Revered Psylinker, which works just like a Psylink Neuroformer, granting a pawn a new Psylink or adding 1 additional rank if they're already capable of casting. So why 3 totems? The Simple Revered Totem purely works as a meditation focus to generate motes. Nice and simple if you've got a Tailbinder that needs charging up. The Wrathful and Life-Filled variants are both far more expensive to make and offer additional bonuses, granting 50 more max reverence to the owner of the totem and bestowing them with a new power. Wrathful grants the Curse of Death, which is a short-range cast that lasts for 8 hours on the target, increasing pain by 200%, incoming damage by 50%, lowering melee dodge chance by 20, and negating injury healing factor. Extremely useful for rapidly healing targets like Sanguiphages or huge animals such as Thrumbo, which will go down dramatically faster thanks to hitting pain shock threshold that much quicker. The Life-Filled grants the Blessing of Life, which boosts global work speed by 50%, lowers sleep fall rate by 25%, and reduces mental break threshold by 20% for 8 hours. This can be fantastic for something like a medic, allowing them to work rapidly to patch up any wounds, reducing the chance they'll snap and leave the hospital, and also keeping them awake that little bit longer if it was a particularly bloody night. This isn't the only way to restore reverence, however. If you're using Ideology, you can set rituals to restore reverence to participants as one of the potential rewards as well. Very useful if you've got a few Tailbinders demanding attention. Right, reverence is done, what about Aurum? You'll be happy to hear that Aurum is far easier to explain. You have a new item called Aurum Fuel. It can be made at a crafting spot from either 20 gold or 200 silver for 1 fuel, with each unit of fuel restoring 20 Aurum to a Glint Scale or Ash Feather when consumed. So yes, if you do want to use the abilities of these 2 races, you will quite literally be paying for it. You'll also occasionally come across items known as Aurum Idols, which can be found from quests or chamois merchants. These can be consumed to increase the maximum Aurum a pawn can store by 10. So that's all of the new structures and items covered. Time for the genes. Let's start with the Glint Scale. You're going to know quite a few of these from base game Biotech, things like Non-Senescent, Scarless, Archetype Metabolism and Ageless. Very similar to a sanguiphage, minus the gene implanter, deathless, and perfect immunity. So your glint scales should live long, physically healthy lives as standard. The big sidestep now is instead of being hemogenic, they have aurum thirst, which sees them gaining their aurum supply bar and having a passive drain of 2 aurum per day, meaning glint scales are costing you 200 silver, or 20 gold, every 10 days that they're in the colony. They'll be costing you significantly more if you're frequently using their abilities, which this aurum thirst is used to fuel. Blazing Claws is a mix of sharp claws and heavy hooves from Mammalia, with even more armor penetration and the chance to set the target on fire. This makes glint scales some of the most dangerous melee combatants included, as of recording at least, in the Biotech expanded mods. To make sure that they're safe in melee combat too, they also have adamantium scales, which naturally gives them 90% sharp armor, 40% blunt armor, and 80% heat armor to every single body part. This makes it insanely easy to mitigate early game damage from pretty much any weapon with glint scales, but you'll need to be more careful later on, as EMP damage conducts across their skin and causes a great deal of pain, so they're going to struggle to stay in combat with mechs whilst you're lobbing EMP grenades in, trying to help them by stunning the enemy. Aurum Detonation is an ability that costs 40 fuel to use, for very good reason. It allows the pawn to scatter pools of fuel around them before exploding in a huge AoE of fire. Just remember how much it costs to use this each time you pull the trigger on the ability. Avarice Instinct is another gene that forces the jealous trait, meaning if you have more than one glint scale in your colony, some are always going to be unhappy. Draconic Wings grants another aurum consuming ability called Vast Flight. Living up to its name, it has impressive range, allowing glints to get in or out of combat very easily. It also offers them some insulation against the heat and cold. From here on, the genes are pretty standard. Given that they're dragons, all glint scales have fire spew, like imps, and it doesn't cost any aurum to use the ability. They have fast wound healing, as well as innate fire resistance, strong melee damage, robust, and unstoppable, making them a clear choice for a melee leader. To offset this, they're unhappy. Hyper-aggressive, sleepy, weak to cold, and, depending on if you see it as a negative or a positive, psychically deaf, which means they'll struggle to be buffed by any psycasting, but they also can't be hindered by any negative casts either. Finally, for skills, they have great melee, strong construction, strong crafting, awful plants and awful animals, so while not gifted with natural skills, they're fairly handy with a hammer and screwdriver. After that, we have the Ash Feathers, who use aurum as their fuel of choice. They share the same Archetype genes with glint scales, Scarless, Archetype Metabolism, Non-Senescent, and Ageless. However, they're far easier to maintain than a glint scale, as they have the aurum stability system to offset the passive loss from aurum thirst. This, however, reduces the amount of aurum that they gain by consuming fuel by 50%, meaning that you'll be spending twice as much silver or gold to keep an ash feather topped up. Fortunately, they won't be costing you money to simply exist, so what can you spend their aurum on? They have cauterization, which allows them, at range, to tend any wounds on the target at the cost of inflicting an 8-hour 100% pain debuff. Understandably, burning yourself to seal a wound isn't a pleasant process. Not only can they burn away external wounds, they can also purge negative memories too by rewiring another's brain. This ability only works on fairly impactful negatives, requiring them to be at least minus 10 mood to be impacted. It also has a 5-day cooldown. You'll need to be very careful with this ability as it reduces consciousness by a flat 25%, and everybody finds out that at some point in Rimworld, there's a big difference between things that read consciousness 75% and minus 25% consciousness.
And of course in Canada the whole thing's flip-flop.
It also amplifies pain, which could see a pawn with scars or active wounds likely passing out from pain shock if this is cast on them. Phoenix Wings works just like Draconic Wings, giving the vast flight ability and improving comfortable temperatures. And we're back into the relatively normal genes now. Fire Spew, just like Imps and Glint Scales, and now on the flip side to Glint Scales, Ash Feathers have a weak immunity, cold weakness, delicate and extra pain, so they are decidedly not a combat race. To offset this, they're psi sensitive, fast, happy, fire resistant and kind. This pairs perfectly with their skill modifiers of awful shooting, awful melee, awful mining, strong animals, strong social and great medical. It makes them perfect handlers, doctors and wardens. Given that they're also likely to be far away from combat, they're a safe choice to put moral guide rolls onto, as you're unlikely to find them downed after combat, so you're free to use their abilities to speed up anyone's recovery, or perhaps hasten prisoner conversions. Last one then, and you're going to need Mammalia for this, the Tailbinder. Whilst they still have Ageless, Archite Metabolism and Scarless, you've lost non-senescent. So if you're unlucky, you'll end up with a Tailbinder that spawns in at an age where they're old enough to potentially develop age-related issues, like asthma or a bad back. While Scarless can heal these issues, they'll still come back and potentially consume a cooldown on your Scarless gene. So, no Aurum here. Now that you've got Revered Embodiment, this is what gives Tailbinders their Reverence need, and also passively boosts their size sensitivity by 50%. As the supply drains at a rate of 4 per day, with a mote restoring 20, you'll need 1 every 5 days, with each mote taking about 8 hours of meditation to generate. It's easy enough even with a single pawn meditating for 2 hours every morning. So what is this Reverence powering? Well, outside of the abilities you can gain from more expensive totems, Tailbinders have 6 casts, split over 3 genes. They have curses of pain and sluggishness, both of which last for 8 hours. Pain increases pain by 150%, duh, but also increases damage taken by 25%. This can even be stacked with the Curse of Death from the Wrathful totem, increasing incoming damage to 175% total. Curse of Sluggishness burdens a pawn by lowering movement, manipulation and melee damage by 25%, whilst also increasing their ranged cooldown by another 25%. Most of these abilities store multiple charges and take 8 hours to refresh a single use. Then they've got Blessings, of Inspiration and Celerity. Inspiration has a 3-day cooldown, and as you might expect, inspires the selected pawn. Celerity increases movement speed by 25%, as well as improving melee dodge by 20 and removing all chances of that pawn triggering traps. Now, this is an insanely niche ability to be able to make good use of, but it is cool that it exists. The gene for the Righteous Punishment sees more direct impact, with Punish working like a bone shard that Sanguiphages can throw, dealing large amounts of sharp damage to a target at a short range. They also have Brilliant Blast, which is a thrown explosive AoE that does simply insane damage to any targets unfortunate enough to be caught within its blast. This is more than capable of completely destroying a target's torso, essentially splitting them in half. Tailbinders, as you'd expect, have multiple foxtails, which keep them nice and warm. They also have a gene for Reverence Greed, seeing them become unhappy if they have less than 75% of their stored reverence filled, meaning that if you expend a lot of abilities in combat, they're going to be miserable afterwards. You'll want to balance their mood carefully to avoid them breaking in combat because of this. Like other races from Mammalia, they have sharp claws, changing their melee fists into little, fast knives. They also have Forager's Intuition, making them fantastic with plants. They then have the very dangerous combo of Sensitive Whiskers, Extra Pain, and Delicate, meaning they can be downed in a single blow if you aren't careful. To go with their additional size sensitivity from the Revered Embodiment, they also have Size Sensitive as a gene, boosting it by a further 20% and increasing their meditation and caster stats. As with most of these races, they have Fur Skin for warmth, and they also have a gene of Dark Vision, like a few of the other Mammalia races. For skills, they're gifted with strong plants, animals, and art, whilst doing poorly in melee. All in all, you've got a more micro and macro intensive mod than Mamalia was. You'll be required to stay well on top of these races' needs if you pick one of them up, or start with one in the colony, either dedicating time to worshipping them or making sure that they have a constant supply of wealth to consume. It's basically like having Elon Musk in your colony, only with less misogyny and no edgy 14-year-old humour. Whilst yes, these races may be undeniably powerful, only the Ash Feather and Glint Scale are potentially going to turn up in raids, if you've enabled the Mythic House of Fire, and even then, they're only a 2% spawn chance. So the House of Fire is far more likely to throw vast quantities of fire-worshipping tribal Xenos your way, hoping to take home your riches to feed their gold-hungry demigods. This isn't as strong of a recommendation as Mamalia got from me. That mod just has far more flexibility and it fits in nicely with everything else. This might power creep just that little bit too much for you, and you end up in those runs that have a god pawn that your entire colony revolves around. Similar to how I found standard values with Psycast Expanded. If you start with a Tailbinder or manage to get one really early on, until raids are arriving in the 50s or 60s, a single brilliant blast will normally see them fleeing. Is it fun? Yeah, it can be. Is it balanced? Nah. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Take care.